afternoon, Dr. Swan. As you have read my email, I am Jun Sang Lee, a PhD student at Institute of Korean Studies at FGA University of Berlin. It's a great pleasure to finally meet you, and thank you very much for taking your time to join this interview today. Before we begin, I'd like to address a few administrative matters briefly. This interview is part of a research project organized by Korean European Center at Free University and funded by Korean Development Institute, KDI, in South Korea. I will briefly introduce the background of our research. Over the past few years, our team has conducted a quantitative study on how Korea is perceived across the European countries. However, this year we decided to shift toward a qualitative approach, focusing on in-depth interview with leading experts. We want to go beyond the statistical trend to better understand the narratives, experience, and meanings that shape how Korea is represented and understood in various cultural and political contexts. Our current theme focuses on public perceptions of Korea in Europe, especially how these perceptions have evolved over the time in relation to Korea's cultural presence and political development and academic representation. In this sense, we are truly honored to speak with you, Dr. Son, today as an expert on South Korea and as someone who has previously contributed to all your quantitative research. Your perspective is extremely valuable to us. I'm personally very excited to hear about how you first became interested in studying South Korea. For example, could you tell us a little bit about how you first became interested in studying Korea and Korean studies?
Yeah, of course. Well, it's a long story which I won't tell you in its entirety. But actually, I grew up in Australia, and Australia was a very strategic target of Japanese public diplomacy and sort of nation branding policy in the 80s and 90s. And so Japan was very active through its government sort of authorized work in Australia in encouraging the embedding of Japanese language education as core in primary and senior schools, and also significant cultural engagement with Japanese schools, for example, doing exchange programs with Australian schools. So all my childhood, I had Japanese lessons at school. We had exchange students at school. And so Japan was very much and by extension, Asia was very much, I guess, a cultural and political presence in my life. And that then led me to decide that after I finished university, I wanted to do the JET program, the Japan Exchange Teaching Program, which is the equivalent of Korea's EPIC program, I think. And so I then went and spent 3 years living in Japan, which is obviously in close proximity to Korea. And that was my first trip to Korea back in 2001, I think, on a short holiday. But I didn't really think much of it. But living in Asia made me very much aware of East Asian international relations. In a personal sense, that was the time of the 2002 FIFA World Cup, shared between Japan and Korea, followed by obviously the attacks on 9/11, North Korea's alarm about the potential that it faced being part of the axis of evil, as designated by George W. Bush, escalation in nuclear weapons development in North Korea. So I was kind of starting to become much more aware personally, as a resident of East Asia, of what Korea was and the presence that it had. On the one hand, as this incredible cultural powerhouse, potentially through the football world that I was watching, but also the geopolitical stresses sometimes. Anyway, I won't tell you more about that story, but I went on to London then to do an MA in international relations, which is my field, international relations and politics. And so when the time then came to do a PhD, I think I started in 2010. I had some work experience working in politics, in business. And I actually thought, well, my background is in international relations and politics, but I think I would like to take a career focus, because I understood that studying Korea would help me understand my Korean family. But equally, I was just very interested in inter-Korean relations. I was very interested in the geopolitics of North and South Korea. And so that was my entry point. And from then on, I did a PhD which wasn't technically in Korean studies, it was international relations and politics based, but I was situated in a department of Japan and Korea, and that therefore meant that I had a lot of direct kind of interface with Korean studies as an area.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was like so interesting, like personal story, like how you developed and how you end up in Korean studies as well. But then, like at this point, like you are personally interested in Korea's politics and also like international relationship within East Asia, right?
Yes and no. I do also look at, I guess, South Korea's, a lot of my research is in the field of
Mm.
North Korean human rights work, human rights
Ah.
activism.
Mm.
And because that is a global transnational movement, a lot of my work is on that work
Mm.
internationally beyond East Asia. But equally, a lot of my work as a representative of Korean studies in the UK is necessarily about Korean soft power in the
Mm.
UK, in Europe,
Mm.
and internationally. So I'm often called upon to comment or write about nation branding, South Korea's soft power strategies, the
Mm.
implications of North Korea's actions and choices on kind
Yeah.
of Korean identity
Yeah.
perceptions in the world.
Ah,
So
yeah.
it's a bit more global than that.
Yeah, but like this study is rather more about like public perception is the like kind of like theme like we wanted to like
Yeah.
know and like we need to listen from your this perspective and given your extensive experience, for example, like Japan and Korea, particularly Korea, observing and teaching about Korea, I would like to hear your perspective on how the general public in the UK maybe perceive Korea today or like how it has been changed.
Yeah, so it's going to be through popular culture. It's going to be Netflix. It's going to be the songs that are played on the radio. And I noticed that when a Korean K-pop group or K-pop artist song is popular, the BBC, the main
Mm.
BBC radios will play um, those songs. It will
Mm.
be obviously K-pop Demon Hunters has been huge with children.
Mm.
Um, but you'll know, all of the big
Yeah.
dramas that were popular everywhere were popular here. There were
Mm.
big
Mhm.
consumer markets here.
Yeah.
I mean, they also encounter, I suppose, um, through I think Korea pushing itself as a distinct country, rather than products appearing, for example, in a
Mhm.
Chinese supermarket. There
Okay.
we recently had a branch of Oseo open in Sheffield, and it's huge, and I could not believe the queues, the
Mhm.
lines of people waiting to go in.
Mhm.
um, and there are more and more of those across the bigger cities in London, so the bigger cities in the UK and in London.
Mm.
There are more Korean restaurants. So rather than being, an Asian shop or an Asian restaurant, it'll be a Korean restaurant or a Korean store selling
Mm.
things that maybe used to see Japanese versions of these 10, 15 years ago. We're now seeing
Mhm.
independent Korean versions of these places where people can go and buy Korea, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Mhm. But let's say like, was there any particular event or the moment, like watershed moment, like when you notice a visible shift in how Korea is perceived in the UK in the like past 2 decades or something?
Um,
Political event, cultural expert, like media representation, any particular events you might imagine?
I think it's been a slow burn, and I think I have to be very conscious of my own bias because I
Mm-hmm.
notice things about Korea because of
Yeah.
my background. Other people don't. I know that I would often mention something like, so for example, the presidential impeachment event that happened in 2024. I think I mentioned that in passing, and to just people I know who don't work in the university who might have actually not known what country that happened in, for example. So it's very variable. There will be it's quite rare for significant political events such as the
Mm.
Sewol crisis, the impeachment of Park
Mm.
Geun-hye, the candlelight protests. It's unusual for those things um, for people to pay attention to those things in a
Mm.
sustained way. There'll
Mm.
be a headline for a day or two and then disappear so that
Mm.
people often don't really ever grasp the full story or how the story ended. So that is a challenge. And so it tends to be big headlines, or unfortunately, there is still that that continuing problem of confusion between North and South Korea, and how what's happening in North Korea, what North Korea does, then reflects on South Korea. So, you know, it's a little bit confusing. I do remember during COVID-19, for example, as well, when it appeared that it was that the statistics in Korea were very high. You know, that there was this sense, oh my gosh, this, you know, there's this terrible thing happening in Korea. We hope it doesn't come here. And then, of course, the UK turned out to be a complete disaster when it came to COVID management and, you know, our subsequent lockdown policy. So, you know, it can feel like a place that's very far away and that what's happening there doesn't affect us. But yeah, I wouldn't say that political, geopolitical events are majorly significant other than those headlines. In terms of other things, it would tend to be breakout cultural moments like Squid Game. Maybe the Pyeongchang Olympics achieved a little bit of visibility for international audiences. But again, it was a Winter Olympics, which isn't often as popular with viewers and sports fans. So it's an interesting thing. It still feels very much like a niche area of interest and attention for people in the UK.
Yes. So one of the interesting points is like also BBC, the YouTube channel, or like this kind of like BBC media is quite gain popularity in Korea, even like how they broadcast about the Korean issues.
Yes,
And
yeah.
like because like they also broadcast in Korean.
They
And then
do, which is
yeah.
unusual to have a world service, yeah, in Korean.
So like I was also wondering like this kind of like impeachment and like leadership change and democratic movement in these days, and then how do you think like recent political development in Korea have UK's media portrayed or like the broadcasted? Were there like
Yeah.
negative view on it or like positive?
No, I don't think so. I think it was well informed. I think the advantage of having the BBC World Service has been that the reporting is much better than it used to be. It's less cliched. There's interest in a greater variety of topics about South Korea. It's not always North Korea's done this, North Korea's done that, or K-pop. It will be interesting things about South Korean society. Although the news, being the news, does has a negative bias to it, so they will tend to pick up on stories that don't always paint Korea in a positive light. And I think also I think while democracy is very much highlighted as being in robust health in South Korea, and I think that was the story at least I and my colleagues and others who were interviewed by the BBC made sure to emphasize, was the robustness of Korean democracy in the face of a declaration of martial law. You know, there were questions around, well, is Korea a safe place to go and visit? You know, are our students studying in Korea in danger? So, you know, there was some public relations work to do around reassuring people that, yeah, no, it's fine. These are things that happen everywhere, and it's part of the democratic process. You know, we have people in our streets protesting over Palestine, over immigration, over all sorts of things all the time. It's no different to that. It's just a different set of issues. So sometimes what the media picks on, and regardless of how well it researches and presents the issue, the way that it then is interpreted by the public can sometimes be challenging to explain.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, politically, like maybe we have to move on to the like again the media and popular culture and representation, and like more specifically, like we wanted to know like what recent Korean drama, films, and culture products have attracted the most attention in the UK. Maybe like this is quite tricky question. Maybe you said like you have not been interested much in this pop culture. Maybe
Yeah, I mean,
through your class or like students, you could see
yeah, I
something.
mean, I do have to consume these things because journalists ask me to comment on them, or um, I do have to watch what's going on. But yeah, I mean, I don't think the classic sort of K-drama formula has mass appeal in the UK. Um, it tends to be niche fan groups that will go for um, the classical K-drama love story formula. For whatever reason, the things that have tended to be popular are things like Squid Game, which I think held a lot of appeal with younger people online, particularly in the gaming world, which then escalated into mainstream attention. Similarly, with following on from that, it opened the floodgates to, I think, more people's Netflix algorithms showing them versions of Korean film and television. And I think for a while that did draw audiences to programs like, I think, The Glory. But The Glory then again was very dark and very had some dark themes, which are kind of similar to the types of dramas that the BBC often makes in
Mm,
terms of being about murder or mysteries and revenge and these kinds of themes. So the kind of soft fade love story is not something that I think draws a lot of
mm,
mainstream attention. Some films have done well. Past Lives was quite popular as far as I can
mm,
recall. I remember doing some
mm,
interviews for that.
mm,
Um, but yeah, I think also in the world of influencing,
mm,
I've noticed a lot of Korean beauty brands entering
mm,
the British influencer
mm,
space, and that is drawing considerable attention to K beauty as an export. And I think it's one of the biggest. I think it's had one of the steepest increases um, in the size of the market in the UK ever in the last year,
mm,
and I think it's tripled or something in the last 2 years. So it's given that beauty has become a much bigger industry generally in the last sort of 5 years. K beauty has entered that very forcefully and is doing really well actually.
mm.
Um, so I think that's a big one.
For your perspective, what would be the like main challenges or opportunities for the Korea's image in the public perception in the UK near the future? Like, what would you suggest to develop this public image of Korea, like in popular culture or?
Yeah,
Mm,
I mean, I think the piece about um, Korea's, I think global leadership in things like green technologies, uh, consumer electronics, the automotive industries, and so on. I've noticed a shift even in advertising where now, brands will name themselves as Korean in advertising more explicitly than they used to. I think there used to be a bit more of a willingness to hope that consumers thought that Korean cars were Japanese cars and would therefore assume they were good quality and would buy them because of that. But now Korean, I think, industries, and particularly in the automotive industry and consumer electronics, are more confident marketing themselves as Korean because they are good and attractive. Um, but I do feel that there's perhaps more that Korea could do in illustrating to popular markets that it is a leader in some of the technologies that can help us solve some of the specifically environmental and sustainability challenges we're facing. Obviously the UK is working towards a net zero policy of entirely green energy. We are facing energy issues in Europe whereby we don't want to be reliant on Russia, for example, for our energy. We don't want to be purchasing it from US markets. We would like to be self-sufficient. And I think Korea has a lot to offer in terms of technologies. And I believe there is a partnership with the UK at the moment in the works. I think it's like a 200 billion. Don't quote me on that because I can't remember. But I think there is a fairly significant partnership already in process. But I don't think that is known or understood by the public at all. These are things that kind of happen at the civil servant government level, and that don't really reach consumers. But part of knowing other peoples and other countries and other cultures is about sharing solutions to problems that we all face collectively. And you know, sort of showing that the UK and Korea can be partners in working towards solving some of those challenges, I think is important, because we are similar in many ways. We're both effectively island countries. We both have similar sized populations. We are both facing challenges of an aging population, and you know, other issues, and we both have some of the same ambitions. And I think, you know, we could be working more closely on those challenges that we share as well.